Beneath the final sunset glow of the Palace of Versailles, there was a name that filled all of France with equal parts hatred and pity, the Countess of Polignac, the dearest and most cherished confidant of Queen Marie Antoinette, yet also the vampire, cursed by the people. Tonight, by the soft, flickering fire, let us step into her real life, a story you need not struggle to remember. Listen closely, for the last sigh rising from the shadows, just before the grand ball came to an end. She possessed a face as pure as an angel, yet wove a web of greed at the very heart of power. The story of the Countess of Polignac is one of extreme favoritism and a prophecy of inevitable ruin. Before the storm of the revolution erupted, how did she play the irreplaceable double in Queen Marie's world? This is more than dust of history. It is a midnight confession of human nature, friendship, and the irresistible tide of an era. People only remember the queen on the guillotine, yet forget the woman who once whispered in her ear. The Countess of Polignac was the final bright flourish of France's ancien regime, and also its heaviest shadow. Tonight's bedtime journey takes you behind the closed, carved gilded doors of Versailles. In this gentle narration, let us behold the doomed splendor built by beauty and wealth. Prologue. If beauty could truly be a mortal sin, then in late 18th century Versailles, that guilt would have belonged to her. She was the only emotional anchor of Queen Marie Antoinette, yet also the most reviled vampire in the eyes of the French people. The Countess of Polignac, a name that once stood for the ultimate elegance of the Versailles court, yet also foreshadowed the most horrific destruction. Tonight, by the softly dancing fire, let us enter her true life through a story that need not be memorized with effort. People have always wondered, why would the proud last queen of France willingly hand over all power and fortune to this woman, even at the cost of being condemned as the ruin of her nation? What magic lay hidden in the Countess's gentle, blue eyes, that could let an entire empire slowly sink amid luxurious dances? Now, settle comfortably into your pillow, and let your mind cross those gilded gates with me, back to an age of perfume and conspiracy. Chapter 1, The Crack in Fate and a Fateful Encounter. In the glittering ballrooms of Versailles in 1775, 29-year-old Yolande de Polignac stood in the corner, almost awkward and out of place. At that time, she was merely an ordinary housewife from an impoverished noble family, struggling desperately in a quagmire of debt. Yet when Queen Marie Antoinette's gaze swept across the crowd and settled on that almost transparently pure face, the course of French history turned. The queen had grown tired of the stiff, statue-like old aristocrats of the court. She craved sincerity, craved companionship free of political calculation. The Countess of Polignac's calm, unassuming, faintly lazy temperament struck precisely at the deep loneliness within the queen's heart. "Why do you not come to court more often?" the queen asked softly, her voice carrying an almost humble longing. The countess merely curtsied and replied gracefully, "Your Majesty, I cannot afford the life of Versailles." This frank, almost unguarded remark utterly conquered Marie Antoinette. In that moment, she resolved to buy the entire world for this woman. This was no simple friendship. It was the prelude to catastrophe. The queen saw salvation in that crack in fate, but not the abyss waiting just beyond. Chapter 2, A Golden Cage Built by Indulgence. Before long, the Countess of Polignac moved into the most lavish apartments in Versailles, directly adjacent to the queen's own chambers. Money flooded into the Polignac family like a tidal wave, annual pensions of hundreds of thousands of livres, ducal titles, and even her mediocre husband was granted prestigious positions. The queen's dependence on her reached a pathological level. In the small hamlet of the Petit Trianon, they fed lambs and picnicked like ordinary girls, trying to escape the heavy formality of court life. Marie Antoinette once wrote in a letter, "She is my soul, my double, my only place of rest." Yet this pure friendship appeared as the most provocative insult in the eyes of France's starving population. The Countess of Polignac gradually abandoned her earlier detachment. Members of her family took over nearly all key positions at court. Her perpetually fragrant salon became an underground political center where the fate of France was decided. Ministerial appointments often depended on a single whispered word from her. She still wore that serene, unconcerned expression, yet her hand unconsciously tightened its grip on the crumbling crown. Spoiled by the queen, Polignac became the perfect scapegoat, absorbing most of the public resentment that should have fallen on the queen herself. Chapter 3, The Real Face Beneath the Shadow of Power. If you had stepped into the Countess's chambers late at night, you would have found she was not the master of political intrigue portrayed in rumors. She was, more than anything, an extreme and refined egoist, simply savoring the security brought by such immense favor. More than once, she felt exhausted by the queen's almost frantic, emotionally hungry love, yet she could not leave this golden pillar of support. At times, her relationship with the queen resembled a symbiotic bond. The queen bought her emotional companionship, and in return, she secured prosperity for her family. When Louis XVI attempted to cut court expenses, Polignac showed unprecedented toughness, even threatening to leave Versailles. Every such threat forced the queen to compromise, sometimes clinging to her in tears late at night, begging her not to abandon her. We can imagine the complexity of her feelings in those moments. She pitied this lonely monarch, yet also resented the heavy entanglement. She was no longer the pure young woman who first arrived at Versailles. Anxiety about the future and weariness of power began to creep into her gaze. Meanwhile, outside the walls of Versailles, gossip had swelled into a flood. Pamphlets accusing the two of an immoral relationship flooded the country. Polignac became the symbol of France's moral decay. Yet all she could do was maintain her fragile elegance within that luxurious salon. Chapter 4, Final Tenderness Amid the Storm of Revolution. On July 14, 1789, the bells of the Bastille tolled the death knell of the Ancien Regime, and shattered the peace of the Petit Trianon. Panicked screams echoed through the corridors of Versailles. Yet when Marie Antoinette heard the news, her first thought was to protect the Countess of Polignac. "Go quickly. Flee this place," the queen whispered in the dead of night, pressing a heavy roll of gold and jewels into the countess's arms. It was an unbearably sorrowful farewell. The queen knew that if this woman's name remained in Versailles, the people would tear her to pieces. The Countess of Polignac wept, one of the very few times she lost control in her life. She realized her protective umbrella was collapsing. Disguised as a maid, she escaped the palace that had granted her boundless glory, beginning a long, desolate life in exile. From the bumping carriage, she looked back. The lights of Versailles blurred in her sight, like an endless dream finally reaching its end. She had been one of the most powerful women in the land. Now, she was nothing but a rootless stranger in a foreign land. The queen stayed behind, facing the wrath of Paris alone, facing the guillotine already prepared for her. Their friendship was severed in an instant, leaving later generations with a bitter mix of betrayal and powerlessness. Chapter 5, Echoes of Exile and the Final End. During her years in exile, the Countess of Polignac's beauty faded rapidly. Poems that once praised her turned into mocking ballads. She fled first to Switzerland, then wandered through Austria and Italy. Though she carried a great fortune, she would never regain inner peace. She followed news from Paris closely. Every rumor of the queen being mistreated plunged her into long, heavy silences. In October 1793, when word reached her that Marie Antoinette had mounted the guillotine at the Place de la Concorde, she completely broke down. She had lost more than a friend. She had lost the very pillar that gave meaning to her entire existence. Less than 2 months later, the Countess of Polignac died at the age of 44, consumed by despair and illness. Some say she died of grief over the queen's death. Others claim she died of the constant, gnawing fear of execution. Her bones were buried in a foreign land. The soul that once wielded immense influence at Versailles finally vanished into the cold winds of the Alps. Her life was like an extraordinarily magnificent yet hollow bubble, bursting instantly upon touching the sharp edge of reality. Epilogue. The Countess of Polignac left history with more than just the silhouette of a greedy favorite. She was the very embodiment of her era, refined, fragile, indulgent in sensual pleasure, yet deaf to the thunder drawing near. To answer the question from the prologue, why did she capture the queen's soul? Because she represented the freedom and peace the queen longed for more than anything, even if it was only an expensive illusion. At the end of this story, the sun of Versailles finally sank below the horizon, taking with it all the noise and sin. Now the tale is done. May this old story of faraway France carry away the last distractions from your mind. The night is so quiet you can hear only breathing. Let your body relax completely, melting into this warm darkness. Good night. May you have a carefree dream, after the final ball of Versailles has ended.